Welcome to Teolumen Insights, where we reveal the hidden forces that shape the way you live and show you how to use them to create real transformation and supercharge your health, mindset, and daily life. Here are your hosts, Emma Greenwood and Nathan Sinclaire.
Welcome to Teolumen Insights, the show that turns your research stacks into aha moments. I'm Nathan Sinclaire.
And I'm Emma Greenwood, helping you connect the dots.
Today we're going deep on Mae-Wan Ho. You sent over a bunch of her articles and excerpts.
Right.
Looks like you're really interested in her ideas about quantum coherence in organisms.
Definitely. Mae-Wan Ho was a real trailblazer. You know, she challenged how we see organisms as just complex machines.
Interesting.
She saw life through this quantum lens, proposing that quantum coherence is a big part of how organisms work.
So not just cells and molecules interacting like cogs in a machine.
Exactly. Ho argued that life is way more dynamic and interconnected. She saw organisms as liquid crystalline systems, where quantum coherence allows this amazing organization and communication across multiple scales even.
Liquid crystals, like the stuff in LCD screens.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with living things?
It's a really cool analogy. Liquid crystals have these properties that are kind of in between a liquid and a solid. They flow like a liquid, but their molecules have some order, like a crystal.
Okay.
Ho thought the cytoplasm in cells, you know, that watery environment where everything happens.
Right.
Well, she argued it has those liquid crystalline properties.
So not a chaotic soup of molecules, but a highly structured system.
Exactly. And this liquid crystalline nature, according to Ho, it's key for that quantum coherence.
Yeah.
She proposed this coherence allows for really efficient energy transfer and communication. And it even influences things like biological activity and even consciousness.
Whoa, hold on. Consciousness. We're talking about awareness here.
Mm-hmm.
How could quantum coherence be connected to something that complex?
It's a bold idea. Definitely sparked a lot of debate.
I bet.
Ho thought that the network of coherence domains within an organism's, liquid crystalline structure, well, she thought it could be where conscious experience comes from. She saw consciousness as a property of the whole system, not just something in one part of the brain.
So it's not just neurons firing, but a more holistic awareness.
That's how Ho saw it, and she thought this interconnectedness was really tied to the properties of water.
Okay, water. Essential for life. But how does it fit in with this quantum coherence and liquid crystals idea?
Water's got a much more active role than we think. Ho pointed out that water molecules, through hydrogen bonding, well, they can form these highly ordered structures called coherence domains.
Okay.
And these domains, she argued, act like these little pockets of quantum coherence inside the organism. And they, help with energy and information transfer.
So water molecules acting in a really organized way. Almost like transmitting signals.
That's a good way to think about it. And those signals, Ho suggested, could influence all kinds of things, from enzyme activity to cell communication to how organs and systems work.
It's wild to think something as basic as water could be so important.
Exactly. And Ho's work really shows how dynamic and interconnected life is. She used this metaphor, quantum jazz.
Quantum jazz. I like that. What did she mean by that?
Well, she was talking about how there are so many players in a living organism, right?
Yeah.
All that complexity and the performance, how it all works together. But most of all, the freedom and spontaneity, like everything is improvising from moment to moment, but still in sync with the whole.
That's a really beautiful metaphor. So instead of a rigid machine, life is more like an improvisational dance.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that improvisational quality, Ha thought, is why life's so adaptable and resilient.
So we've got liquid crystalline structure, coherence domains in water, energy, and information flowing everywhere. And it's all in this dynamic, improvisational way. Pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is. It really makes us rethink some of our assumptions about life.
This raises a question for me. If this quantum jazz is so important, what happens when it gets messed up?
That's a great point. Ho believed that when that coherence gets disrupted by, say, toxins or stress, it can lead to a loss of vitality and even disease.
Interesting.
She argued that keeping that coherence is key for health and well-being.
So it's not about fixing broken parts, but about making sure the whole system's in harmony.
Exactly. And that's where Ho's work starts to touch on some really big questions about how we think about health and sustainability, even our relationship with the natural world.
This is all really fascinating. We've covered a lot of ground. Before we go any further, though, let's make sure we've got a good grasp on Ho's main ideas.
Good idea.
So we've established that Mae-Wan Ho saw organisms as these liquid crystalline systems, right?
Yes.
And that quantum coherence is essential. We've talked about those coherence domains in water and how they help with energy and information transfer.
Uh-huh.
And we've touched on that idea of quantum jazz as this metaphor for how dynamic life is.
Great summary. And remember, these ideas really challenge how we traditionally view life as just a mechanistic process.
Right.
Ho's work shows us that life is way more interconnected, dynamic, even, dare I say, magical than we thought.
I love that. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning. You sent us a ton of material. I'm excited to explore more of Ho's work.
Me too. Let's dive back in.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. Organisms as these liquid crystalline systems all humming with quantum coherence. Let's get into some examples. Like, how does this quantum jazz actually work in living systems?
Well, one area where Ho's ideas really stand out is in explaining energy transfer, how it's so efficient in organisms. Think about things like photosynthesis or respiration. Energy is being converted, used incredibly fast and precisely.
Yeah, it really is amazing. Our bodies manage to keep everything running so smoothly all the time. We don't even think about it. How does Ho explain that efficiency?
She argued that quantum coherence, facilitated by those coherence domains in water, well, it allows this super efficient transfer of energy, bypassing like the normal energy loss, the kind you get with heat and randomness.
So instead of that energy just dissipating as heat, it's being channeled?
Coherently, yeah. She used this analogy of a magic roundabout to describe it. Imagine energy flowing smoothly, like cars on a roundabout, no crashes, no traffic jams.
Okay, yeah, that would be way more efficient. So this roundabout is powered by the quantum coherence of water molecules.
That's the key. She argued that water, in its liquid crystalline state, acts as both the medium and the message of life, enabling that energy transfer and the information flow, all that stuff that orchestrates those complex biological processes.
Okay, I think I'm following you so far, but can you give me a more concrete example? Like, what's actually happening at the molecular level?
Sure. One of the specific examples Ho talked about is the excitation of the OH bond in water and proton delocalization.
Getting a little technical here. Break it down for me. What's special about this OH bond thing?
Well, remember, the OH bond is what holds the hydrogen and oxygen atoms together in a water molecule.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when this bond gets some energy and becomes excited, the proton, that's a positively charged hydrogen ion, it becomes delocalized.
Delocalized, meaning it's not fixed to one spot anymore.
Exactly. It's like it can be in multiple places at the same time, which is, a classic quantum thing.
Right.
And this delocalization is, it's helped along by the hydrogen bonding network within those coherence domains we were talking about.
So instead of just being stuck in one spot, the proton can move around this network.
Yes, and that's where it gets interesting. Ho suggested that this proton delocalization allows for this type of energy transfer called jump conduction.
Jump conduction. The energy is literally jumping across the network.
You could say that instead of energy being transferred like really slowly through these random collisions, like in normal heat transfer, well, here it can be passed along quickly through those delocalized protons.
Such faster and more targeted.
Exactly. And Ho, she actually cited evidence from studies on water in confined spaces and materials like Nafion. It's a synthetic polymer used in, fuel cells that backs up this idea of jump conduction.
You mentioned Nafion. What do fuel cells have to do with living organisms?
Well, it's all about efficiency. Fuel cells, like living organisms, they're incredibly efficient at converting chemical energy into usable forms, right?
Right.
And in some fuel cells, this conversion relies on, proton conduction through things like Nafion.
So by studying how energy flows in these man-made systems, we can learn about the processes happening inside living things.
Exactly. Who saw these parallels between the way energy is transferred so efficiently in these man-made systems and the way it works in nature?
Fascinating. It's like she's combining physics, chemistry, biology, even engineering to understand life.
Exactly. Her work was truly, interdisciplinary, making connections between all these different fields to see life in a new way.
This brings me back to something you said earlier, water being not just the medium, but the message of life. What did you mean by that?
It's one of the more mind-bending parts of Ho's work. She proposed that the way water molecules are arranged, influenced by things like electromagnetic fields or other molecules, well, it can actually carry information. and influence biological activity.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that water can store and transmit information like a hard drive?
It sounds crazy, but yeah, that's what Ho is suggesting. She argued that the way water molecules arrange themselves, especially in those coherence domains, well, they can create these patterns, like signals or instructions within cells.
So it's not just the water itself, but how those molecules are organized, that organization, it has meaning.
Yeah.
And can direct processes.
Right. And this goes beyond just energy transfer. Who even thought this water-based information system might have something to do with consciousness?
Consciousness again. Wow, we're really pushing the boundaries now. How could water be connected to something as intangible as consciousness?
It's definitely a bold idea. And Ho's ideas about consciousness were still very much in development.
I can imagine.
But she saw a possible link between that interconnected network of coherence domains in water and how subjective experience emerges.
So those tiny pockets of organized water, all interacting, exchanging information, they could create the feeling of awareness.
That was her hypothesis. She thought it was possible, given how unique water is and how central it is to everything in biology.
Okay, we're definitely in uncharted territory here, but it is fascinating. Before we get too deep into the mysteries of consciousness, let's address the elephant in the room. You said earlier that Ho's work is, well, it's controversial. Why is that?
Yeah, one of the main criticisms is that quantum coherence, the kind we normally see in very controlled lab settings, super low temperatures.
Right.
Well, critics say it wouldn't last in the kind of warm, messy environment of a living cell.
So like all the motion activity inside a cell would mess up those delicate quantum states, like trying to keep things perfectly ordered in a hurricane.
Exactly. Skeptics argue that conditions inside a cell are just too chaotic for quantum coherence to really matter.
But we've been talking about all this evidence that water behaves differently, that it can form these ordered structures. Doesn't that contradict that argument?
It does, and Ho actually addressed those criticisms. She pointed out that traditional quantum theory, the one that's based on isolated systems, well, it might not be enough to describe how complex living organisms are.
So she's saying that life might work by different rules that include both the coherence of the quantum world and the dynamic complexity of living systems.
Exactly. She thought life might operate according to principles that we don't fully understand yet. Principles that, connect the quantum and the classical, the ordered and the chaotic.
It's an interesting idea, but it does raise a lot of questions. Like, if Ho is right, and this quantum jazz is really happening inside us, what does it mean for our lives, practically?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one that Ho explored in her work, especially when it came to sustainability and alternative approaches to health and healing.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I want to get into those implications, see how Ho's ideas could, translate into real-world solutions. Where should we start?
Let's start with how Ho's work could inform a more sustainable relationship with the natural world. It's an area where her insights are really profound.
Sounds good. Let's see where this quantum jazz leads us. We've been exploring Mae-Wan Ho's ideas about this quantum jazz in living organisms. And now I want to talk about some of the practical implications of her work, especially her vision for a more sustainable future.
Yeah, Ho, she was really worried about the planet. She thought that her scientific findings, they could offer some real insights for how we can live better, more in harmony with nature.
I see how understanding life as this interconnected quantum jazz could lead to a more holistic way of thinking about the environment.
Right. And Ho, she really criticized those conventional sustainability models, the ones that focus on just reducing harm.
Right.
She wanted a bigger shift, a move towards systems that actually, enhance life and help the environment regenerate.
So not just, minimizing our impact, but actually creating systems that give back.
That's it. She pointed to traditional practices like that dike pond system in China's Pearl River Delta as examples of sustainable systems. They've been around for centuries. They work by mimicking nature's cycles.
Could you describe how that dike pond system works? What makes it so sustainable?
Well, it's a great example of a closed loop system where there's very little waste and things are constantly recycled. So imagine a network of ponds and these dikes.
Yeah.
You raise fish in them and their waste, it becomes fertilizer for the fields nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And the plants, they feed the fish. It's a self-sustaining ecosystem.
That's amazing. This beautifully integrated system, it all works together.
Yeah. Ho believed that applying these principles what she called circular thermodynamics, where energy and resources are flowing in these closed loops. Well, she thought that could be how we design truly sustainable cities and societies.
That's a powerful idea. Moving beyond this take, make, waste model, the one that, kind of runs our economy now.
Yeah, and her ideas about energy efficiency in organisms, how they're so good at using energy without wasting it.
Right.
Well, that connects directly to this vision of sustainability. If we can learn from nature how to use energy without creating so much waste, maybe we can, design our technology and systems to do the same thing.
So it's about moving from a model of exploitation to one of cooperation. Working with nature, working with each other.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important part of Ho's work, her ideas about health and healing, alternative approaches to those things.
Earlier, we talked about how disruptions of this quantum jazz could make people sick. But what about treating illness? What are the implications there?
Well, Ho she was pretty critical of conventional medicine, how it focuses on symptoms instead of like the root cause of the illness.
So she was advocating for a more holistic approach, seeing the body as a system, not just a bunch of separate parts.
Exactly. Who believed that a lot of those chronic illnesses, they come from a loss of coherence in the body, a disruption of that interconnectedness, the kind you see in healthy systems.
It's like that jazz ensemble we were talking about, when the instruments are out of tune and the rhythm's off.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And just like a conductor would want to bring the orchestra back into harmony, Ho thought healing was about restoring balance and flow to the whole system.
So it's not just about targeting like one symptom. It's about fixing the underlying problem, the thing that's causing the illness.
Precisely. She thought there was a lot of potential in therapies that work with the body's own healing abilities, approaches that focus on getting that coherence back instead of like just masking the symptoms.
This makes me think about the growing popularity of things like acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine, energy healing. Those seem to fit with Ho's view of the organism as a system. Dynamic, interconnected one.
Definitely. Ho saw those modalities as more aligned with her vision of life as this interconnected quantum jazz ensemble.
But is there any scientific basis for these alternative therapies, or is it all just, unproven stuff?
That's a big question. And Ho, she knew that we need more research in these areas.
Okay.
But she pointed to a growing body of evidence that suggests that some of these therapies do have real effects.
Can you give me an example? Like, what kind of evidence is there?
Well, there's some interesting research on the effects of acupuncture on the body's bioelectric field.
Okay.
Studies have shown that putting needles in at those specific acupuncture points, it can actually change how electrical currents flow in the body. Maybe even those pathways of energy and information that Ho described.
So acupuncture might be working by restoring coherence.
Yeah.
Helping to get that quantum jazz back on track.
That's one way to look at it. And there's also research on, meditation and mindfulness, showing that they can have positive effects on brainwave patterns.
Right.
And the overall coherence of the nervous system.
Interesting.
Those practices might be helping to harmonize the body's internal rhythms and promote a sense of, interconnectedness.
It sounds like Ho's work gives us a new way to understand these ancient traditions, a way to bridge science and spirituality.
It's a great way to put it. Ho thought that embracing a more holistic view of life, one where we're all connected, well, it could lead to a better future, a more compassionate one, a more sustainable one where we see ourselves as part of a larger web, not just isolated individuals.
It's a powerful message, and a timely one, too. With climate change and environmental problems and chronic disease, maybe what we need is a new perspective.
Ho's work definitely gives us something to think about, encouraging us to question our assumptions and explore new possibilities. It's a good reminder that we're part of something much bigger, the symphony of life that's always changing in ways we might never fully grasp.
Mae-Wan Ho's work is really inspiring. It shows the power of curiosity, of thinking across disciplines and challenging what we think we know. It's an invitation to explore life with open minds and open hearts.
It's been great diving into her ideas. Thanks for sharing these sources.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of quantum jazz. We hope it's giving you some new ideas to think about. This is Teolumen Insights, signing off.